Hey everyone, welcome back to City Speak. Today, we're bringing you a special bonus episode from our friends over at the Good Government podcast. The new episode of their show, hosted by David Martin, features a conversation with our very own Clarence Anthony. David and Clarence get into what good government looks like in practice and all of the ways that NLC's local leaders are actively working to improve the lives of their residents. So check it out over on their feed. And today, on our feed, we're bringing you a preview of their show, featuring an interview with former New York City Mayor Bill DeBlasio. We hope you'll enjoy the episode just as much as we do. So check out the Good Government Show wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you again in just a couple of weeks for our regularly scheduled programming.
Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm Dave Martin, and I'm very honored to have the former mayor of New York City, Mayor Bill DeBlasio. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Dave. We go back a long way. It's good to be reunited.
Yes, I was going to sort of disclaim that right at the beginning. We've known each other for, I don't know, how long do we go back? You were working. I met you on the Hillary Clinton campaign.
So that's 23 years.
Oh, wow. 23 years.
And you live in what was my city council district in Brooklyn.
Correct. We are practically neighbors.
Yeah. So
yes, and we've managed to stay in touch over the years in your service. So you were, and correct me if my information is correct, and please feel free to fill in some details. You started off working in campaigns, Charlie Rangel, former congressman, and also the Hillary Clinton Senate campaign. You worked for Housing and Urban Development, I believe, and then you were elected to City Council, my district right here in Brooklyn. Then you served as public advocate for the city of New York, and then you were finally elected mayor.
Correct, for 2 very long terms, including 2 years of fighting COVID. You left out that I started out on the campaign of David Dinkins when he ran for mayor, and then ended up serving in City Hall for 4 years and on his second campaign as well. So I've seen it all, Dave. I've seen it all.
So when you walked out after your last day of the Dinkins administration, did you say, I'm coming back here someday?
No,
you
decidedly
didn't.
not. No. I at that point was very unsure. That was a really tough time in the history of the city.
Yes, it was.
And I think Mayor Dinkins was not always treated fairly, shall we say. And at the end of that experience, I wanted to continue to be in public service, but I was kind of soured on the notion of running for elective office. And then over time, my mind opened up again. But if you had said to me that day, hey, pal, you're coming back here and in that job, I would have said, you're smoking something, my friend. And that's when it wasn't legal.
So when you came back as mayor and you walked around, did you say, this is different? Wow, this is a different. Was it a whole different experience walking back in as mayor?
Oh, my God, yes. I mean,
obviously, you've been in the building as public advocate and,
sure,
as speaker, but there's a little bit of difference walking into City Hall and Gracie as mayor.
Yes. Well, you said speaker. I was not speaker of the city council. I was an everyday member of the city council.
Right,
but
that's what I meant.
Charlene, my wife Charlene, who I met working for Mayor Dinkins, she likes to talk about the first time she got invited to a meeting at Gracie Mansion as a staffer. She snuck some of the napkins out, and kept them as a souvenir because it felt so special to be there. And then fast forward, we're living there. It was a strange familiarity.
Yeah.
Because it had been so much of our lives around City Hall and Gracie Mansion. And at the same time, I had thought that being a staffer years earlier prepared me. And I think a little bit of it did, but the world had changed so much. It was so much faster.
Yeah.
And so much more intense. And we didn't, thank God Mayor Dinkins didn't have to deal with social media, among other things, a lot of changes. And so, no, I'm glad I had the previous experience because I think it gave some grounding, some familiarity to the rhythms, to the intensity, but it was a whole different species by the time I got there.
They say that being the mayor of New York City is the second hardest job in politics after being president of the United States. Do you agree?
I do. And look, I had the opportunity to work in the Clinton administration, to work on the second Clinton presidential campaign, and obviously to work with the First Lady when she ran, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, when she ran for the U.S. Senate. So I got a very substantial exposure to the world of the presidency, and then, worked with a lot of mayors around the country through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, National League of Cities. I worked with members of Congress over the years, governors. I think there's a lot of tough jobs. I don't want to belittle any of the others, but I think in terms of scrutiny, speed, expectation, the media dynamics, and we always have the toughest, biggest media in the country in New York City, and just the diversity. It's the most diverse place on earth. It's almost 9 million people packed in together in a small area. What could go wrong?
I think I read somewhere it's the largest board of education in the nation. Yeah. It's the largest. Sure. It's the 6th largest army in the world. I think when you look at different ethnic groups, there's more Puerto Ricans in New York than there are on the island of Puerto Rico. There's more Asian Americans than there are in all of Japan. I mean, I think these are all fair stats, right?
I think those are you got some exaggeration going there.
Okay, all right.
But I think you're right about largest school system in the country. You're right about our police force is the largest in the country, and yes, rivals the size of many armed forces around the world. Our communities of different people from different countries are typically one of the largest outside those countries.
Okay.
That's a true statement. So it's quite striking. I mean, just to generalize in our very, very diverse Latino community, there's 3 million Latinos in New York City. I don't have the latest count on the size of the total population of Chicago, but I think it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
Just to recognize it's not just diversity, it's the intensity of the diversity.
How do you manage that? How do you manage when someone says, and I'm sure this happens oh, you can't do that because, that belongs to this group. Oh, you can't do that because, on that day, because that's a special day for this group. I mean, how do you manage to juggle all of that?
Well, of course, it creates complexities, but I think if you start from the perspective that you want to respect all groups and include all groups, it helps a lot. I mean, for example, when I came into office, a lot of members of our Muslim community, which is depending on who you talk to, some people would say it's about 500,000 people. Some people would say it's closer to 1 million, but probably about 100,000 kids or more in our school population are of Muslim background. And we as a city did not recognize their religious holidays, but we did recognize Christian and Jewish religious holidays. So one of the things my team and I did was we formally added the 2 most important Muslim holidays to the school calendar. Well, I'll tell you, that had a massive impact in terms of the community, both the human reality, the familial reality, but also the sense in the community that they were being respected and seen as an important part of all that is New York City.
Well, as a parent with a kid in public school, it was you have another day off?
Yeah, I know. That's the parents might have had different views on that, but
yes.
But the important point was to keep some harmony around here. And I would note that New York City is, in the scheme of things, much more harmonious than most very diverse places in the world, and certainly more harmonious than we were. When I started working in New York City government politics, the end of the 1980s, there was horrible tensions and often violent tensions between communities. We've got problems, but it's far, far improved over those decades. So, I think the notion of making a very evident display of respect for all communities really matters. And then there are some things that you can do to kind of create some balance. And you're right, there are times when you can't do something, on a certain day, or you have to think through the prism of respect for that community. The Orthodox Jewish community has a lot of holidays that a lot of people who don't happen to be Jewish or Orthodox Jewish might not know about. You get to learn that and understand there's certain days that if you want to do anything that might involve members of that community, don't even think about it. But it's fine. It just becomes its own language. You sort of get used to balance to be struck.
I hate to use this word, but I will. Is it a fun job? I mean, did you enjoy doing it? Or is there so much thrown at you daily that you just are getting through the day, getting through the calendar?
There's elements, of course, of both. There were some times that were not fun at all.
Yeah.
We went through some very painful realities in the relationship between police and community. We lost some police officers. We had tragedies involving neighborhood residents. I mean, we had lots of things that no one could possibly think were fun. And just the entire experience of the pandemic was, especially the first months, well, and just unbelievably tense and confusing because we didn't have enough information, and we didn't know where this whole thing was going.
And for a while, New York was the hardest hit city in America,
unquestionably. Yeah. But there's also some beautiful things, of course, about the job. I mean, if you love the city, I am in love with New York City and always have been. Yeah. And the way you get to experience the city is unbelievable as mayor. I mean, you see and feel it probably more completely than anyone gets to.
And you took the subway. Beautiful. And you took the subway to work.
I did not take the subway to work regularly. That's not true. Bloomberg did that, but he got his, he was chauffeured to the subway stop. So from his Upper East Side mansion. Yes, so I'm like, I don't want to overdo the meaning of that.
Okay.
I took the subway a fair amount.
It is the best way to get around town.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially going into Midtown, it just made more sense. But no, I think the thing that is beautiful about the job is the connection to the people of the city, and in all the diversity and the richness of the city in terms of the humanity. The other thing is you meet amazing people.
Yep.
And one thing I loved, I mean, there's days when you take an idea and you actually bring it to fruition, and that creative process. I mean, I love talking about how we got to universal pre-K because it was extremely difficult, extremely challenging, but also a lot of creativity, a lot of teamwork, a lot of inspiration. And, big things can happen in New York.
Well, that was something I really wanted to ask you about, because that was one of your campaign promises, is to bring universal pre-K. Certainly a good government idea to bring universal pre-K. How hard was it to get that accomplished?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think it is the hardest thing in the world by any stretch. And I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, it is the best investment of your education dollars you could possibly make. So right there, if and I'd say to any of the folks listening and who are thinking about how to improve their school systems, and if they don't happen to have universal pre-K right now, I'd say whatever you're spending on education, if you don't have universal pre-K, I'd take some of your current resources and move it that way. Or think very seriously about what we did, which is figuring out a path to create some new resources where some people can do that, some people can't. I originally proposed a tax on the wealthy, and we did it very mindfully, realizing that it might be one of the things where there could be some unity. That if you were going to ask more of those who had done very well, asking for it for education, particularly education for the youngest kids, is something that even a lot of wealthy folks bought into.
Yeah.
And that will work in some places. Obviously, it won't work in other places. We ultimately got our state legislature to fund the program partially, directly, instead of doing a tax. I think there's a real bipartisanship around universal pre-K. It's fascinating to watch in this country. Only about a third of American kids get full day pre-K, which is a horrible dynamic. But it's interesting that some red states, including Georgia and Oklahoma and Alabama, have done some really groundbreaking work to make pre-K more accessible compared to most of the country. And obviously, blue states and cities as well, New York, Washington, D.C., New Jersey's doing a lot more now, Michigan's doing a lot more. The fact is that this is an issue that lends itself to bipartisanship. And in terms of the methodology, it's we know how to provide quality pre-K in this country. It does exist. It exists in public schools. It exists in community-based organizations, religious schools, charter schools. We used all of them. And it's not something you have to invent. It exists. It's something you have to fund. You have to find the teachers. You have to train the teachers. You have to make sure the quality levels are.
But you're not reinventing the wheel, so that makes it easier, right?
You're not.
Yeah.
That's right. And I just couldn't, let me tell you, and we saw it in the test results. Whatever you think of test results, they're one measure. We saw the improvement begin as soon as we got kids getting to third grade who had been in full day pre-K. We saw the improvement begin in the test scores, and we particularly saw that the achievement gap was starting to close, and it benefited African-American Latino kids deeply. This is something. This is as good government as it gets. I urge everyone find a pathway, even if it takes time.
So let's look at the other side of the coin. You came under fire as mayor for having a sort of a what's the best word? Frosty relationship with the police department. How do you manage that, and how do you manage the kind of severe backlash you got in the media for not being as attentive to the police department as they thought you should have?
Well, I really like the way you phrased the questions, because I think that's not what happened, but I think it's exactly what was perceived.
Okay.
Because what's the police department? So there's the police leadership.
Yep.
There's the police union. There's the rank and file members who don't necessarily think the way the leadership or the union does.
Yes.
I think it was much more complex. I had a fantastic relationship with the police leadership, and a lot of the policies we put in place actually were agreed, had a lot of support and agreement from even the unions, some of the unions, at least we had 5 police unions, and some of the rank and file. And then there were other things that clearly there was disagreement on, but it wasn't one thing. And then I have to be clear, the media portrayal, and I think it's a problem in America when if you fight with a union, and I'm pro-union.
Yes.
I obviously have a long history of believing in the labor movement, but I have had real differences with public safety unions. And I think there's something we need to talk about public safety unions having a right to support and defend their members' interests, but also having an obligation to the broader public because of the nature of their work. And there's an imbalance there that hasn't been addressed. I did a series of policies that anyone would have said were respectful of police, including we expanded the size of the police force. We added a lot more training for police officers. And, my police commissioners were all long-term veterans of the NYPD who are highly respected by
You put cameras on body cameras on the cops. So that was under your watch. We put
body cameras on the cops. And actually, there was a growing appreciation in the force that was something that in many ways would help good officers to prove that their behavior was appropriate.
How do you manage you got criticism? How do you manage that? How do you deal with that as mayor in your head?
It's an excellent question. It's here in this city. I love my people, but as I like to say, I represented 8.8 million highly opinionated people.
Yeah. If
you get scared of criticism or swayed too much by criticism, you might as well go home.
Okay.
And it's interesting because there is a thin line between being armored and strong and consistent versus becoming numb to it. And, it would be crazy if you're trying to run New York City to flail around and, read the papers each morning and get all upset over what
Did you read the papers every morning?
Saying.
I mean, I know that you get clips, you're the mayor. But would you pick up
every morning?
Would you pick up the Daily News and read it, back to front like everyone else?
No, I would get a briefing and then I'd have all the papers in my office, and depending what's going on, I might get into some pieces or other pieces. But the point being, you could be upset at every interest group criticism, every commentator criticism, whatever. You could go flailing about and running about and you would never get anything done. But you also have to, and this took some learning on my part. You have to, when someone's right, you have to be able to say, that's a damn good point. Maybe we didn't understand something right. Maybe we did something that we didn't have enough information. Maybe we had the wrong idea. At first I kind of saw criticism with one broad brush, and then over time I came to understand that some of it was very constructive.
Okay,
but you can't get lost in it. So it's something I worked on a lot to try and strike that balance.
We could talk about this all day, and I'd like to. Just quickly, what are you proudest of as mayor that you accomplished?
I'm certainly proudest of pre-K for all.
Okay.
And I'm proud of it in particular, the number one reason for the children and the families we reached, but also because the classic, they said it couldn't be done. I mean, we had the most august editorial boards of our city sort of, patting me on the head and say, well, what a lovely and impossible idea. And we were able to do it. We had 20,000 kids originally before I came into office in full day pre-K, and within less than 2 years in office, we brought that number up to 70,000 and made it a universal right. And it's worked. And it's the kind of thing that will, benefit people for generations. So I'm very, very proud of that. But I'll tell you, because good government is the theme here,
yes.
What I also am proud about in terms of the structure of government is we came to understand that if you put the decision makers and the key folks in the room, the key folks who have to make any policy come to life in a room, and you just keep coming back, you can do extraordinary things. I mean, the reason we got pre-K done in record time was we just had a kind of a nonstop war room. We met whenever necessary at the highest levels. And we repeated that again, of course, during the pandemic. We repeated that in terms of fixing some of the problems we found in our own homelessness policies that had to be improved. We found that kind of war room, running constant war room approach to be incredibly valuable. And we also found that so many problems that plague America's cities are not about everyone. They're about actually a small number of people who loom large in everyone else's lives. Bill Bratton was my first police commissioner, an outstanding public servant. And he said to me one day, the number of violent criminals who really cause the majority of the problems in New York City in terms of violence are a few thousand in a city of almost 9 million. And we know who a lot of them are. And obviously the challenge was to build an appropriate case in some cases, in other cases they need to identify someone. But the point was, it was finite. With homelessness, street homelessness in New York City, the federal count each year, we got to a point in the last few years where that number was give or take 3,000 people on the streets. Well, we actually came to the decision we needed to know exactly who each one was. Yeah. And we started having our outreach workers go out and really build deep relationships with each individual street homeless person, and then keep a running program to identify literally person by person what was going to get them off the street. And it took different approaches for each person. But my point being, if a few thousand people were the cause of a lot of our violent crime, and if a few thousand people were painfully on the street, and obviously that was harmful to everyone and painful for the whole city, the solution is not necessarily always big, broad brush policies. A lot of times it's, how do we help this specific homeless person to come in and stay in off the street? Or how do we find this individual who's causing pain in their community, who's violent, and work the equation to prosecute them and get them off the street? And we found you could apply that to a lot of social problems. We never got to expand it as far as we wanted to, but it's actually, I think, the shape of things to come.
So would you tell someone to run for mayor? If somebody came to you and said, hey, I'm thinking about this, I've been a state rep, or I've been a city councilman, would you encourage them to do it?
Yeah.
Or would you say, no, get another job, do something else?
No, it's an amazing job. It's an amazing job if you can handle the heat in the kitchen.
Do you miss it?
I mean, again, I miss the ability to make an impact. I miss the people. I mean, the camaraderie. The camaraderie is amazing. I mean, it's, this is everyone I talked to since our administration ended just over a year ago. Everyone feels this kind of sense of, we were in something so intense, so passionate, everyone shoulder to shoulder. Didn't mean you all agreed with each other every single day, but there was a sense of common cause and deep commitment. Yeah, of course I miss that. And I see a lot of things out there that I'd love to be able to have an impact on. But I'll tell you, of course, it's nice to be away from that too. It's nice to have more time with, I never got to see friends. Yeah. It's nice to spend more time with family. It's nice to, not be woken up in the middle of the night, all those things. But of course I'd tell someone to run because it's interesting because right now, talking to prospective public servants or mid-career public servants, which I've experienced now over the last 6 months or so, teaching in a few different institutions. I always tell people this is the best life choice.
Okay.
That in terms of your ability to make an impact, whether, it's running for mayor is sort of one of the ultimate examples, but there's lots of others. But, I always say to folks, if you want to make an impact, if you want to live a life that's creative and energetic and filled with meaning and work with great people, go into public service. And I think elective office is the highest form of public service in many ways. But only, a lot of young people I talk to are worried about the negativity, the criticism, the social media. And I tell them, that comes and goes. Like, I think about that now, but I don't think about it much compared to the things we were able to do and the amazing experience. But I think one of the things I'd say to anyone in public life, and now it's not just elected officials. I mean, look at the horrible negativity thrown at election workers and election officials who weren't elected and, just serving people and doing the best they could. I think we all have to come to the conclusion that, no one intimidates us. No one, because of their negativity, can tell us not to serve or not to follow the path we believe in. And I think, some people may feel that negativity is too much for them, and I don't want to value judge. If that's what they feel, I respect it. But I would also say, don't let people of ill will dissuade you from what could be an extraordinary life, an extraordinary sense of mission.
I could talk about these. We could keep this going forever. We have in the past, but we have to get to the questionnaire, the Good Government Show questionnaire. All right.
Okay, I'm ready.
We have a question. This is going to reveal your true philosophy on government. Here we go. All right. Now, you were you worked in government as a staffer, then you were elected to city council, public advocate, and mayor. What is your definition of good government?
Government rooted in the needs of the people. Government that listens to the grassroots and stays connected to the grassroots, and government that is not captive only to the wealthy and the powerful.
How did you measure your success or lack of success, when you were mayor? How did you know if you were providing good government?
Some of it is easy. I mean, we thank God for the first 6 years before the pandemic, crime went down, and we had a very elaborate crime statistics to prove it. We saw, in education, our graduation rate go up, our test scores go up, not anywhere near as much as we wanted, but still steadily. On something like pre-K for all, it was you measured by the number of seats you produced and the quality of people's experience. So there were lots of very straightforward measures. But the measure I also applied all the time was, we had a platform.
Okay.
And where we were in terms of implementing our platform. And we had a very specific tracking system of all the initial platform commitments and then later commitments that were made, in the course of governing, and how we were doing in terms of implementation. We did pretty damn well in terms of the quantity, reaching deep into our platform and implementing a lot of it. Qualitatively, I think most of it went quite well. There's obviously a few areas I'm not happy about, or, we learned painful lessons, or we had to do better.
Did it keep you up at night? Like, I can't believe I can't get this done. Oh man, this is not going well.
Yes and no. The sheer volume and the intensity, if you let it get to you when there was an imperfection, again, you might as well go home. There's gonna be a lot of imperfection.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in perfect is the enemy of good. I'm a big believer that sometimes you start something and then it may not work perfectly the first time, you keep going. I always talk about the New Deal, best moment, I think, in American government history with Franklin Roosevelt. Some of those programs were amazingly good, like Social Security. Others failed within a year or two, and we don't talk about them anymore, but that's okay. You experiment.
So let's look at this from the perspective of citizens and residents. They have a lot of, as you said, social media, traditional media. How do they know when they're getting good government? What should they use as a yardstick?
Well, not necessarily traditional media, and with all due respect to traditional media, I think people know what they see with their own eyes.
Okay.
And a lot of times the best information flow is from community, grassroots media, ethnic media, when there's a parent listserv or, the parent website or something, you have all sorts of grassroots, highly engaged, stakeholder-based modes of communication that a lot of times are providing the best information and the most responsive to people's needs. But I always found that, you got a pretty good read from people in communities of their own lives that told you a lot more than anything you would ever read in a paper or see on a news report.
If people feel like they aren't getting good government, if they feel like their elected leader, the mayor, or other people aren't giving them the government that they either voted in or wanted, what should they do?
I think there's a difference sometimes between the feeling and the reality.
Okay.
Because I think it's been a very frustrating time in our history, very, obviously a certain level of division and the reality of the pandemic, the reality of the inequality that plagues this country. So sometimes government might be doing good and sincere things, and yet people are very sour and feel overwhelmed, and they're not wrong to feel that. So I feel we experienced some of that, where a lot of the programmatic approach was good in the scheme of things, but people's problems and challenges were so deep, it was kind of beyond what could be done in a few years or what a local government could do. So I think if people nonetheless, if people feel something's not working, their voices are a lot more powerful than they realize. I mean, I would know pretty quickly if a community was upset about something. No, really. Quickly, I mean, yeah. and I had a vast city, but there were a lot of listening stations and people, writing and emailing and coming to community meetings and going to their local representatives and or going to the media. That stuff would bubble up pretty quickly. So I think making your voice heard really makes a difference. One of the things, Dave, you'll appreciate, I did 70 town hall meetings across the communities in New York City in the first 6 years. And people consistently got up, were passionate, angry, complaining, and then offered their solution. And that I really appreciate. And I think that's what most people do. They actually know something about what they think would be a better approach.
As a political insider, elected official, and also worker, what would you like people to know about how government really works on the inside?
I'd like them to know how hard people work, how constant it is, how devoted. I mean, people in government do not get paid what they're worth as a rule. They have incredible responsibilities, much more than most people in the private sector, and they get paid much less. But they show up every day, they do their job overwhelmingly. I mean, there's certainly some bad actors, don't get me wrong, but the vast majority work incredibly hard. And it's not portrayed that way. This is an area where I'm glad your show is focusing the way you are. I think a lot of the other media should really examine themselves on this point. They do not portray the truth of how sincere and how hard-working most people in government are.
That is essentially why we started the show. So thank you for that. I think you're going to hear those. I think you're going to hear those quotes again. All right. Now, hardest question. Who's your political hero?
Franklin Roosevelt.
Really?
Not hard at all.
Yeah. Not hard at all.
And Fiorello LaGuardia as mayor, unquestionably.
Did you get to, as mayor, did you get to look at the vaults and read some of the speeches and see stuff?
I saw, one day I did tour the archives at one point and they brought out all this, actually much better than the big speeches. They brought out a lot of day-to-day correspondence with LaGuardia. It was absolutely riot, the stuff people would come up with. New Yorkers are so colorful to write in about. And LaGuardia, didn't mince words. What he felt is what he said. That guy was absolutely an amazing person in our history. I always say, unlike in sports where, we'll use the obvious example, Tom Brady, a lot of people would say greatest of all time at quarterback, but he's only been around the last 20 years. Someone was greatest of all time before him. Someone will probably one day be greater.
Yep.
Well, when it comes to mayors in New York City, there's only one all-time greatest, only one ever will be, and that's Fiorello LaGuardia.
You are probably the only person who's going to give that answer. So I think you've staked that out for yourself. Now, just because I'm a New Yorker and I worked at One Police Plaza where they have Teddy Roosevelt's desk under glass, is there stuff like that for the mayor's office? Is Fiorello LaGuardia's chair somewhere that we should be?
Yeah, absolutely. His desk.
Oh, where's that?
Desk. That was my formal desk in my office, which I loved.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
And I loved it, and it was important to me. Also, there's the portraits of the mayors, and it's really interesting. You go and look at all the portraits, and most of them, they're okay. You get a little sense of the person. The one of LaGuardia has these kind of searing, intense eyes that really capture his passion.
So because most people are not New Yorkers who are listening, just give me a 30-second synopsis of who Fiorello LaGuardia was.
And for my family, he was like a saint. Because my family went through the Depression in New York City. He governed during the Depression. He was a very close partner with Franklin Roosevelt in developing a lot of the New Deal. And he was a child of immigrants who expressed the passion and the emotion of New York City in everything he did. Very progressive, very much a reformer, but also close to the ground, close to the people. A model that, we all should be so lucky to even emulate a part of.
And he read the comics to New York City during the newspaper strike.
Well, yes, there was a newspaper strike at one point. You're right. There was a newspaper strike. And so people couldn't get their comics. And it was a big deal. The comic strips were really big back then. So he made it a point to go on the radio and read them to the people in New York City. That's one of the things people loved.
Yes. All right. You live in Brooklyn. You were mayor of the entire city of New York. Somebody's coming to New York. Yes. What's your favorite dish? What must they eat?
Oh, that's literally a near impossible question.
Come on,
no,
you got to answer. You got to answer.
Cuisine. No, I'm not. I'm going to answer.
Yes.
I'm saying,
okay. Good.
It's a ridiculous question.
All right. Sorry, I get to ask them. You have to answer them.
Now that we've established that,
okay.
I always say, as an Italian American,
yes,
I'm very comfortable saying the best pizza in New York City is Di Fara, which is DIFARA. Okay. Di Fara Pizzeria in Midwood, Brooklyn.
All right.
And it's not a fancy place at all, but if you want the very best of New York City pizza, but also to feel what Brooklyn is really like, go to Di Fara Pizzeria.
Di Fara Pizza, and don't use a knife and fork.
You know, it depends on what kind of pizza you get in life. That drives me crazy. A typical New York neighborhood corner joint, don't use a knife and fork. But if you get real Neapolitan pizza,
yes,
which is more what they have at Di Fara, you might choose to.
You might choose to. All right, we will leave that controversy back in the past. So when you were growing up, did you want to be president of the United States? Did you want to be governor of Massachusetts? Was this something you thought you'd wanted to do all the time?
When I was growing up, you know, the seminal experience in many ways was the Watergate hearings, because I was 12 years old and riveted. I guess I was not a typical 12-year-old that way. I
was watching them too on my little 12-inch black and white.
Great minds, brother. Great minds.
Thank you.
And it was about the most dramatic thing. It was about the most dramatic thing I've ever seen and have seen since. But that certainly convinced me the notion of public service, leadership, whatever form it would take. I think there's always a fantasy about, for me, I'm sure for so many people care about government politics, a fantasy about being elected to something really big. But, you know, it's hard not to see that as a fantasy.
Okay.
You know, like, so your brain, you know, I also wanted to play first base for the Boston Red Sox, you know, so I probably spent a lot more time on that fantasy.
All right.
But I knew it wasn't happening. But at the same time, you know, what a beautiful idea.
Well, I read all the President's Men and Hunter Thompson, so I got on this side, you got on that side.
There you go.
In your time in the city of New York in elected office, what are some of the good government projects that you were able to put forward? Let's end on a high note. What's your legacy for New York?
Well, you know, ironically, the number one legacy for all of us is the people we bring along. You know, 10 members of my team or my circle, however way you want to say it, have been elected now to either public office or political office. And I think more are coming behind that. That means a lot. I mean, so many people got credentialed and have said to me, it's very moving. You know, they now have moved on to even higher roles, but the door to that was open by the time that they did work with me for those 8 years. So the human factor of legacy should never be underestimated. I think some of the people I was honored to bring into my team, you know, 5, 10, 20 years from now are going to be doing amazing things. But in terms of the work, I think the legacy is that we showed you could do something about inequality. And I believe that going forward in this country, you know, everyone knows one of our biggest challenges is going to be addressing the climate crisis. I think increasingly people understand one of the other big challenges is going to be addressing the unfettered development of artificial intelligence and automation and where that's taking us. But the third leg of the stool is the inequality crisis in this country, particularly income inequality, is really going to get worse and worse and worse, particularly with more and more automation. And we got to address that. We proved in 8 years that you could actually structurally address inequality, that you could start to bend the curve the other way towards really helping working people to get better wages, better benefits, more affordable housing available and affordable or free pre-K, a lot of things like that. So I think the big legacy item, if you wanted to generalize it, is showing that even at the local level, we can go at a structural crisis like that and make a real difference. And I think the summary to me is What I found as mayor was a lot of things we were told were impossible, we actually could do. I think what mayors can do, I think what local governments can do is far beyond what is often recognized. And we have to more and more, because so much of the time the federal government, the state government has taken a pass on dealing with really crucial issues. So to everyone out there in the counties and the cities and the towns, I want to say thank you. And I also want to say, believe in yourselves and your ability to do big and transcendent things, because a lot of times no one else is going to do it unless it's you.
I think I read somewhere that you said you would never run for elected office again. How do you plan to continue to serve? Because obviously what you've been talking about is continued service. What are your plans for the future?
Well, there's a lot of forms of public service. Right now I'm teaching, and I'm teaching folks who are going to go into public service I'm at New York University, Wagner School of Public Service. I'm also doing a fellowship at the American University Assigned Institute of Policy and Politics last year at Harvard, the Institute of Politics and the Chan School of Public Health. I have had this blessing over this last 6-7 months to work with the next generation coming up and hopefully coach them, train them, help them, inspire them. That's a form of public service. There's obviously lots of roles in government and nonprofit world. I'll be at this a long time in one form or another, but I can't paint the picture yet.
Okay. Well, listen, it has been a great pleasure to talk with you again and to have you as a friend all these years. I appreciate that. The next time we meet, I think we need to go to Midwood. We're going to go get a pizza together and no microphones, just talk. We could do that. All right.
And that's the kind of invitation I want more of in life.
That's okay. So there you go. Thanks for keeping your phone the same all these years.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, Mayor Bill DeBlasio of New York City and professor at NYU. We thank you for sitting down and talking about good government with us and having a good conversation. Thank you for that.
Thanks for listening to City Speak with Clarence Anthony. If you like this show, let us know. Share this episode with your friends and make sure to subscribe. We're curious to hear what you think, what you want more of, and how we can improve. If you have feedback or an idea for a guest you'd like Clarence to sit down with, send us your thoughts at cityspeakpodcast@nlc.org. Join us next month for a new episode. Like and subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.